In this week's episode, the boys recap turnaround planning, scope collection, prefabrication, and receiving inspections, as well as they get back into the first initial stages of turnaround, such as decon, running temp piping, on-site prefab, familiarizing yourself with the units, some odd jobs they might get into, getting to know everybody, especially your trades, equipment delays, and scope changes. Sit back, listen to the show. Hope you guys like it. Scott, we're back.
Frank, yeah, I can't believe we made it. 5 episodes, still on the
air. We're trying something new today. We got a guest, Ryan. How you doing?
Pretty good, man. Never been better.
Ryan, maybe we should kick off the episode with just a quick introduction about yourself, maybe some inspection, maybe just your work experience or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, no, I consider myself, I guess, a career unit inspector, so I've sort of dived into all sorts of different roles across a couple of different facilities, turnaround planning, turnaround execution, and we'll call it the close up, rather, I should say, what you do after turnaround and how you manage a piece of equipment on stream. Yeah, and that's really where we met, Frank, was back out west, one of the facilities, and luckily you came to Edmonton and I came to Edmonton, so it's great to have a couple of people
Yeah, I know. It was actually pretty funny when we saw each other in the hallways because we started like a week apart at the same facility there, so it was pretty funny. I was like, double take, like you're supposed to be like a couple thousand kilometers away.
I know you. Yeah. What are you doing here? Aren't you on the enemy?
Liked you that much, I guess, Frank, had to follow you out here.
Yeah.
So we're getting back into turnaround. This episode was recorded probably maybe a week or two after you guys will hear it, but turnaround is essentially starting at the facility we're at. This is one Scott's been planning, and we thought we'd start off the episode with a recap because our very, very first episode seems like ages ago already.
It was, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah. So in that first episode, we went over like pre-turnaround work, like scope collection, planning, prefabrication, receiving inspections. Scott, do you think we should start on anything specifically, or?
Well, yeah, like you said, almost pre, kind of like the way in advance type of stuff. And I think this episode will get into like the pre, kind of like right before, and then maybe into the execution. If I remember correctly, I think that episode we ended with like touching on the decon piping a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, would that be a good spot to kind of transition into this one, or a good segue for you, Frank?
I think so. I think we bored people enough with like fabrication and registration and all this other kind of stuff. Let's get into the stuff that everybody kind of likes. What do you think, Ryan?
I agree completely.
Who doesn't like registration?
Oh, it makes your eyes bleed.
So, actually, one thing we were talking about behind the scenes that's usually something that people are unsure of is decon piping or temp piping that definitely gets used at the facilities, not very often, and it's usually not stored in a very adequate way, right? So they quickly throw all this stuff together, and then we expect it to do a certain job for a minimal amount of time and then chuck it back into the mud pit.
Yeah, and like that depends on your facility too, because there's a lot of places I've been to where it's a quite strict procedure they have with decon piping. They treat it just like process piping, as they should, and they have a really adequate cleaning procedure. They even oil the pipes and they store them indoors, and they're labeled and they reuse them, typically rehydrate them every time. And then you have the places that just run some tubing or hose to the nearest ditch and let it buck. So there is a wide variety of that. I mean, I prefer doing it properly myself, but you see all kind of flavors of that depending on the facility.
A lot of places find it's too hard to maintain the inventory of your temporary piping. So oftentimes they'll just say it's not worth the warehouse price because everything's costs something to store it, right?
Yeah.
And maintenance of it, and they'll just say, well, let's just fabricate it new every time, and then you don't have to control it with the ISOs or any of that sort of thing.
Yeah, every time in those new fabrication packages, so there's always a step to retain the piping and store in a safe location for reuse later, right? And it grows legs and walks away.
It depends what it is. Like things like pig launchers, you would definitely want to keep those because they're very portable and small, and you can use them multiple places. But with full decon stuff, usually you need so much that you have quite a spaghetti bowl of piping by the end of the turnaround, really.
Yeah. Do we think do we need to kind of identify what a pig launcher is, or should we just roll with it?
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, we could go deep into that one too. I mean,
it's an acronym, isn't it?
Oh, kind of, but
kind of is, yeah.
What
now you're on the spot.
Yeah, you brought it up.
It's like pipeline integrity
gauge.
There it is,
yeah. In the sense we're talking about right now, during decontamination of the unit or decon, they'll throw like foam plugs through piping and specific equipment, especially heaters.
Heaters, you'll see it,
yeah, to remove fouling or deposits that kind of just occur from the process. So pigging is just kind of like it removes all that stuff, and there's a lot that goes into it. I don't think
really it's the crafty swine you got to look at, the smart pigs. Right? So that's what you're talking about, is the integrity gauge is where you're trying to measure it. So realistically, it's a combination of cleaning equipment and then inspection from the ID. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very good distinction. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, in some cases it is for sure, and even like decoke, you might hear that as some verbiage used, but yeah, that's essentially what it is. You're cleaning out your heater tubes, and then in some cases, you're taking some readings from the inside with the smart pig, like you mentioned.
Although it's very expensive, so usually they don't want to do that. But
yeah. Okay, so with your decon piping, it's obviously being run. I think a lot of times as contract inspectors or even as a unit inspector, as these pre-turnaround activities are occurring, we're going to get called out to either witness the bolt up of, not the entire bolt up, but like either the final assembly and maybe a pressure test. But I think usually like operations would maintain that kind of stuff, right? But
yeah, and that again goes to whatever facility you're at, right? Like everybody's got their own idea of how to do this. There is a pretty good understanding of how you're supposed to do it, but a lot of places don't really follow that. Again, it's the time and the cost and everything. But I mean, a lot of places will do a full hydro test of this. Typically at minimum, there's an operations kind of gross leak check. Some places don't do anything. But I mean, really, you should be treating this like new fab, kind of like you would any of your on-site fab. Like if your repair company's in there welding spools, even if it is for decon, you're still going to treat it like, 31.3, for example, like code piping. You're going to do some percentage ND, you're going to hydro test it. It's no different, right? So it should be the same even if you're running threaded piping too, right? It's quite a volatile chemical you're running through there. You don't want that getting everywhere.
It's true.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But you're right, and it's really a tricky thing. Is often, so when you're fabricating piping, it's usually to a specification. Usually, this temp piping is not related. Let me rephrase that. It's not put onto a P90 with the proper spec. So it's easy for whoever's manufacturing it to just say, well, let's do it with screwed piping and we'll call it good.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no way to actually say that. So what we're doing is we're basically saying we're going to inspect it and fabricate it to a specification. So unless someone wants to go and do that, and if you have the engineering behind it to do it, that's where you can run into that kind of thing. So
yeah,
but it's really difficult because if the facility's disciplined, they will go with the spec.
Right.
And if it's not necessarily as disciplined, they'll wing it a little bit. And in that case, you kind of got to be sure that they're doing things the right way. And you can just, generally speaking, like give you an example. If you're doing some sort of amine de-inventory, we'll call it, don't use screwed piping because amine is a penetrant and you'll just leak everywhere, right? So you need to understand a little bit of the finer details.
But then at the same time on that topic, with the welded piping, you might be getting into postal heat treat and things like that too. So then that's where, when you thought that decon piping is expensive, it just doubled all of a sudden.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of things to consider there.
Yeah.
But the facilities I've been to do a really good job of this. They have a nice standard that they follow, and everybody's just ingrained to follow that. And that makes it easy, right? When you're at a facility that has little to nothing in place with regards to decon piping, it's really hard to enforce them to do it, over and above what they're used to, kind of thing, right? It can be challenging for sure.
It absolutely is. And that's the right way to do it, is to have a spec that you follow,
right,
and hold to it and do the proper engineering behind it.
Yeah, usually those specs should align with the actual line spec as well. Something that popped into my head actually, well, it's a part of this as well, but is purge piping, because sometimes we'll be using refrigerated liquids and stuff like that, and there will be PSVs and stuff on that piping, which I guess depending on how that facility manages that kind of stuff, we may get called out to go look at that.
Absolutely.
And even the assembly of that, because they might treat that different. And, you know, that would be like a nitrogen purge or some sort of chemical injection for cleaning or something like that, right?
Sure, yeah. A couple good examples.
Yeah, so it's something to watch out for. So we called this episode the waiting game, because as all this activity is going on, it's typically pretty boring for pressure equipment inspectors. Nothing's open yet, and I would say maybe not the norm, but you know, usually people sit and wait for stuff to happen, right? What do you guys think about that?
Well, it depends on your role in the turnaround, I guess, too. If you're the guy that's been kind of planning it and following it all along, you're very busy at this time right now. You're still finalizing some ITPs with the contractor. You may be chasing around this temp piping if you're the kind of the only person dealing with it. I mean, there could be a lot of the on-site prefab going on. There's things happening with the scope. We'll get into that a little bit more as we progress through the episode, but it can be very, very busy. But if you are coming on as a contractor just for the execution and you're an equipment inspector, yeah, it's going to be pretty quiet for you right now. You're just flipping through scopes, getting familiar. There's not a whole lot of action for you. So it really depends what your role is.
Thanks for adding context to that. I know you knew what I was talking about there. As soon as I realized that, yeah. People listening and what the fuck is this guy talking about? But yeah, no, thank you.
That's every episode.
It's yeah.
Nice.
He's not lying. So process instrument diagram, right? So
that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Right letter, anyways.
Oh, I'm never gonna live that down.
That's
so
close enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that what I was talking about is like if from a perspective of a contractor just strictly hired on for the turnaround, as Scott mentioned, if you are involved in the planning and scope collection, which is probably where we should start, and most likely you are one of these people going out to look at these purge piping or decon kind of assemblies, right?
Yeah, my workload's just been getting worse and worse actually as we get closer. But it does, almost at some point it's kind of the calm before the storm. Eventually, when all that stuff kind of wraps up. But yeah, it definitely depends on your role and how busy you can get. And the on-site prefab should be kind of wrapping up at this point. But I mean, there could be the thing that was overlooked, maybe something that was missed from the off-site prefab. So it really varies. But yeah, it does tend to calm down kind of that week before, and it's almost like you're just waiting for that storm to roll in, and nobody's quite sure what's going to happen. It's exciting and scary at the same time.
Yeah, realistically, when you think about it, you really shouldn't feel that you're like that you don't have anything to do, because quite honestly, the downtimes are opportunities to prepare for when you're busy. So it's the opportunities there to make sure that you're prepared and ready for when you really have to function and end up having to be right out of one hole into another hole kind of thing, doing inspections. So
yeah. So Ryan, from a unit perspective, unit inspector's perspective, based on your experience, like what kind of things like you're going to be interfacing with even the new contract, like the contract inspectors that are coming on site, right? Like onboarding, helping them get familiar with the unit and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
What kind of things have stood out to you over the years that have really been something of a, obviously they're always going to recur, but what are some key points from a unit inspector's point of view during this time frame of the turnaround?
Well, for me, I'm just walking equipment down, seeing equipment and understanding where it is. Realistically, that's how I remember things, is sort of look at a piece of equipment, identify it with the name, or sorry, I should say the number. Either really, it depends how your mind works, and then identify it with the work plan that's going with it. And the more you familiarize yourself with it, the more you're going to be able to know exactly what's happening when someone asks you at what point this equipment's sitting at. It's very key to identify that.
Yeah, actually, one thing that I find unique as looking from a contractor's lens is that during turnarounds, most unit guys get swapped and put into different units, right? And that's to kind of gain a little bit of experience and a little bit of exposure to something different. But they're usually tasked with being the lead inspector in that role and kind of delegating to the contractors or the other guys who Scott kind of previously mentioned, who are in a cage, right? So,
well, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's less. Oftentimes it means it's more. You need to know the equipment better.
Yeah.
Because you need to know, like, the inspectors are going to come at you with questions about, hey, we found this thing. Is this a concern? And you have to be able to answer that and answer it convincingly. Because having confidence, or rather I should say having someone else having confidence in your ability to know what's happening, is really key to the whole role.
Yeah.
Across the board. So it's being able to have the right answers at the right time and being trustworthy is really what it's about.
Yeah, and really you kind of have to know the entire scope, where as your contract inspectors or your staff people you pulled in, whoever it is, they're going to be delegated to like vessels, exchangers, heaters, piping, and they're going to kind of be focused on that, and they'll be hitting you with those things. Whereas if you're the lead role, like you're that unit inspector or whatever the case is, you kind of have to know the whole scope, right? Because everybody's going to be asking you about everything. And that varies from facility too, right? It's I've been to facilities where the only staff person there is the unit inspector, and they may just be tagging along with everyone else, and they just flood it with contractors to do their turnaround. And, you know, that seems to work okay. And then there's other places that have very few contractors, and it probably depends on the size of the turnaround as well too, where they'll just pull all their staff unit inspectors in and kind of manage it that way and bring in some contract support as required. So there's a couple different ways to look at it there, but yeah, some definite variations, right? If you are in that lead role and it's your unit, you got to know the whole scope, not just the vessels per se, like all the equipment.
Well, not only that, but whatever choices you make in the turnaround, you end up living with for the rest of the 4 or 5 years until you have another opportunity to look at it or fix it again. So you have to understand the context of what went in and what the special nuances are about the different impacts that this decision could make.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, it's like me and Frank have the, I guess, flexibility to jump onto the next job after the turnaround's over. We don't really have to deal with the aftermath quite as much as someone like yourself. So, I feel for you on that one.
I've seen both. You know, the last company I was with flew me into South Africa to do it. Turnaround there, and it was very much the same approach, and it was by the end of it, finish your reports, make sure all your recommendations are in, and you know, some of the decisions that were made were not I would consider bright ones, but right in there I said, look, if you have this repair that I put in, expect to start seeing hot spots the next 2.5 years and mitigate appropriately and make sure you clear it out. So it's the same thing, you just sort of hand them off, but you know, there is an aspect of, you know, what happens next with it that definitely needs to be.
Yeah, observed. And it's good and bad, right? Like it's kind of nice to see those fulfilled and see how it all worked out, and then sometimes it's kind of nice to just see you later and someone else is dealing with
Absolutely.
it. So
there's a lot of stress that comes along.
Sure, yeah, and it's a little unfulfilling too. So I mean, yeah, it's a good way either way, I suppose.
And I mean, it can get quite rancorous too. Some of the some of the arguments, and it's like you guys might not see it, but definitely when you're trying to get your repairs across to the turnaround group, it's kind of like you've got operations as the referee, and then you've got the inspection group, which is trying to fix as much as possible, and then you have the turnaround, which is trying to push it back out to maintain cost, and it's kind of like an equilibrium happens, right? So
that's a good perspective. I like that. As the ops as the referee, they very much are the referee, because they kind of hear both sides, and quite often they'll push back on you, and quite often they'll be for you. So yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I like that.
So they have to live with it, and they walk past it every day.
Well, that's right. It's their equipment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we want to make sure it's safe for them to operate. And,
exactly right.
Most importantly, almost, right? You don't want
Absolutely.
anything bad happening. So
more specifically, they need to know the risks.
Yeah.
You say this is the risk that is being taken on by not repairing it or doing whichever way, and it's up to you. We can only go so far, but it's operations that are the one that say, yes, we are going to turn this on, or no, we're not, right?
I think maybe a good example of that would be where we either found corrosion or some sort of limiting factor, but nobody wants to fix it, so it ends up being derated, right? And then you kind of have to let them know, like, these are the new thresholds, or these are the new design parameters that this vessel can be operated at, and you got to adjust the process accordingly. But usually if it's too big of a process change, you see a new vessel helicopter dropped in like within a week, right?
Exactly.
So
well, that's where that weighing it out game kind of comes in. And fortunately, we do have like some codes and regulations to back us up in some instances, but a lot of things are very much in that kind of gray area, right? Where you can get away with it, you can't type of thing. So yeah, you really do have to consult with your operations, see what they're comfortable with and what they want out of their equipment. Right?
Well, and you know, say we find some corrosion in a bundle, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that this is something that you say, oh, it's not going to make a next turnaround, but it might predict failure 3 quarters through. And so the operations group can come in and say, okay, well, we'll agree to leave it and not fix it now. And then we'll set up another opportunity to go and swap it out with a brand new one.
Yeah.
And so you can choose that way and pick to have a pit stop, which is not the way you want to do it, but
yeah, a little kind of unscheduled pit stop, you know, midpoint between turnarounds type of thing. Yeah, that's not uncommon either, provided the equipment can be isolated. And yeah, that's definitely something they would look at too.
Sometimes they even choose to take the whole unit down and say this is worth more. Say you have a very a point where you need to get the unit up very quickly and making money again.
Right.
So you might choose to take some early benefits for a later term deficit, if you will.
Yeah, it might even fluctuate depending on the price of the product they're producing, right?
Yep.
If it's low at that specific moment of the year, they might just wait till that section or that time frame in the year and bring her down.
Or maybe a company has just bought a new refinery and they need it making money to pay off their debt.
Sure, yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, happens quite a bit.
Yeah, a lot of aspects to it, right? And then there's some opportunity for some maintenance work you can squeeze in there, some opportune cleaning, things like that, right? So
and
sometimes it's beneficial to everyone.
Changes the whole what do you call it, complexion of the turnaround, because all of a sudden your frame shifts where you now have this secondary opportunity you can choose to have things.
Mm-hmm.
Should we get back on track?
Yeah, that was good. I was kind of getting lost in that, but as everybody looks to the whiteboard.
It felt like I was listening to a podcast. I liked it. So we kind of just heard what it's like from a unit inspector's perspective. Getting into the contractor side, where Scott and I can kind of maybe help elaborate on, is if we're a contract inspector, I like to think the expectation is they know that I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to start reviewing the scope and familiarizing myself with whichever specific unit I'm in or any jobs that I'm assigned to. I'm actually going to go walk around in that unit. I'm going to take P&IDs, I'm going to print them out, I'm going to take some ISOs out and go and start familiarizing myself with the unit, the equipment, access points, maybe some external attachments, just kind of see what's going on in that general area. Scott, I'm pretty sure you do the exact same thing.
Yeah, and really you'd be crazy not to, especially let's take it from the perspective of the contractor coming in for execution. So forget all that planning or whatever you were involved in. So just coming in, like the message here is with that week or 2 weeks where it's quiet and there's not a lot for you to do, at least in the unit per se. You don't want to just kick back and relax there because you'll regret that. You don't want to be the guy that is, let's say meet us at V11 and where the hell is that? And you're running around, you don't even know where it is, let alone the scope of the inspection or anything like that. And that goes for everybody, right? That's not just the inspectors coming in, that's the QC people coming in, that's the foreman, the GFs, trade people coming in. They're all taking the same approach, right? You're taking your scope, you're getting, first of all, what is it? Okay, this is my section of scope. You're getting very familiar with it. You're walking it down because the first time you look at that vessel you don't want that to be when you're entering the manway. You want to know where that thing is first of all. So yeah, you're walking it down, reviewing the scopes, and you should be at the point where, especially when you're just a section of the turnout. For the overall guy, you might not know it as detailed, but if you just have a section, like if you're the vessel guy, you should know all those scopes without even having to go into them, because you're more than likely going to have a week or 2 weeks, something like that, to do nothing but that. Review the scopes and walk it down and ask questions. So there's no excuse, right?
No, for sure. And one thing I do personally is I kind of make I know I'm a freaking nerd, but I just kind of feel like I need to put a little bit of extra effort in just to kind of make sure I do the best job that I can. But I make like little packages, like I'll get a few sheets in my notebook or something. I'll print off any pertinent details, like maybe there's a specific sparger or something that we need to go look at, or configuration in a vessel which may be of concern, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to write down just quick cliff notes of what was found in the previous inspection, especially corrosion location, depths, to follow up on that. And what I personally like to do is once I got that list compiled, I'm going to go out in the units, walk them, and I'm going to take daily updates on it. Actually, it's probably more than I need to do, but I can't sit still. I need to be in the field looking at stuff. So I'll go around and just the status. Okay, you know what? This vessel, manway's open. It needs to vent for a day or two before they get in and start cleaning it. Let's move on to the next thing. And then as it keeps going, that also helps give the inspection coordinator for that unit or whatever daily updates for them to bring to their meeting.
Well, and it's key. It's you know, having a contractor or someone, that's the wrong word, someone that's not familiar with the unit and functioning effectively as the role that I'm supposed to do, gives me great confidence to say that this guy's up to snuff with it and knows his stuff. And I can go to him and say, hey, what state is this? And you'll have an answer for me so that I don't have to chase it down. It's very key. Yeah,
and timing, and especially meetings for turnaround.
Oh, totally.
Is crazy.
Yeah, like, you don't, being the guy that doesn't know where the vessel is one thing. You also, further up the ladder, you don't want to be the guy in the meeting that has no idea what's going on, right? And everybody else does. The man watch knows the status of it, but you don't. You know, that's not a very good feeling. And this is really the way to go about it. Like, I think I mentioned in the episode previous to the episode that's the pre to this one, if you want to call it. I think it was the first one. I mentioned a story about being in the cage with all the 5'10" guys, and the kind of claw comes in and picks one of you out of there, and you go do your inspection. It's those are very challenging because you don't have any of the past history. You don't really know what's going on with the equipment. I mean, you have your industry history, which is nice, and you can write a report on what you found, but it's not quite the same satisfaction because you really have a hard time, especially when you find stuff, you have a hard time understanding why it's even there. All you can really do is report it, and hopefully the unit guy that's there all the time knows exactly what's going on. So I mean, those are kind of interesting roles. I don't know if interesting is a good word. They're different and they're kind of difficult. I don't know. That's kind of what I have to say about that. It is definitely preferred to have the time to walk it down and have that history available for sure.
Well, you bring a good point about, hopefully the unit inspector can help you, because a good lead will be able to contextualize that for you, because the more that we can load you with information and context for the inspection and what we're looking for, the more accurate results we're going to get for the RBI in order to plan the next inspection plan. So it's very important.
Yeah, exactly. And if like, the unit guy, I'm sure, has a very good understanding of the history and all that's going on. But if you're having someone else do the inspection, I don't know why you wouldn't want them like as informed as they can to give you the best inspection they can, especially when you're not doing it yourself. So it's a bit of an odd take on it, but that's the way some facilities do it, and it's typically on those shorter outages.
Yeah. I've been involved with certain situations where we'd call for something called cold eye review, which is effectively throw you into the vessel and tell me what you see. And it's never effective. Ever.
No.
Like, we'll get what we're looking for, but it's not what we're actually looking for. It's hard to explain it. I realize I just totally, opposed my own comment. But yeah, it's the more you experience, the better it is to give as much information as possible so you can contextualize what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's kind of like that process, dirty inspection, quick look. That serves a purpose. A quick look for an inspector, there really is no point to doing that. Unless you want to stick your head in there and see the trays are all mangled up or something. Okay, great. But you still got to get in there and do a thorough inspection. That quick look, I don't really know what the point of that is. Maybe to say that it's not clean enough for us and you need to climb back out. That's about all the uses for that.
That's about it. And, my usual answer to hey, we want you to do a dirty inspection, or is it clean enough? My answer is, can I see, or to the whoever's doing the cleaning, can I see the wall? Is there anything obstructed? If there's anything obstructed with debris or any other particles, you need to keep cleaning, generally speaking.
I generally agree with that. Like, the dirty inspection is actually something that I try and capture on my rounds, just trying to get vessel status. And typically, you're right, it's more of for process kind of to
that's useful for them, right?
I think maybe one place where it would add value actually is if, say, you had a bundle extraction, or you could see in through a manway and you could see some damage. You at least can give the turnaround management team some heads up saying, hey, we're going to have a repair here, and start kind of planning for it, or even putting a scope together if it's a exotic alloy or something like that.
Well, yeah. If you're dealing in like the gas recovery unit of like an FCC or something, which is kind of specific, but there's a lot of cyanides in there. But so cyanides are very related to like H2S cracking and that sort of thing, and so that's very key to see it. But if you look at your inspection plan, it will have in there. So technically, it's no longer a dirty inspection; it's a full inspection, including the dirty aspect. Mm-hmm. So it's greater than that. If it's just someone cleaning some sort of brightener, diesel brightener off a crude unit, there's no need to look at that. Just clean it until it's clean.
Yeah, no, for sure.
That was a good example with the bundle pull. That is something that it's kind of nice to watch that come out. If you got a good Boilermaker crew and they ding up those tubes, they're going to tell you about it, and then you can action that quickly. But I mean, if you don't have a good Boilermaker crew or company, I guess they're just going to carry on, and hopefully nobody finds it. They don't think we look at these things. So, I mean, when you look at the back end of all the return bends, and there's a nice crease across all the bottom tubes, you know exactly what happened there. So.
Or all the outside tubes are all bent right in.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, another funny story is when actually on the job site Scott and I met, we were watching Boilermakers push in a bundle, and they put it in upside down. It was a hairpin, but it was upside down. Yeah.
That's right.
And they were wondering why the channels didn't fit on it. And finally, we kind of thought about it. And I think it was the process engineer who kind of figured it out. It was like, that looks upside down, and we were like, yeah, you're right. It is upside down.
Well, I think we were kind of standing back in the weeds watching. They got that upside down. Let's see how this goes. I mean, it's a little hairpin, so it's no big deal to pull it out and flip it around. If some big 100,000-pound bundle, you might want to stop them at the whoa, hold on. Not that you could have that upside down very easily, but
yeah.
Well, the facility I first started at, the way they installed bundles was running a bull moose into it with a bunch of pallets in front of it, and the whole pallets would just shred and explode, and that was how they did it. So we called it maintenance corrosion is what we called it.
Maintenance corrosion,
yeah, or yarding them out with the forklift. That's always interesting
Absolutely.
too. You got a nice touch, you can do it, but it's not everybody has a nice touch.
No, you don't want to be walking through the unit and see the fork wheel, the forklift doing a wheelie, trying to pull the bundle out.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. Oh man, just watch. I've seen a bundle. It just plopped out like it just thump it right onto the ground, right?
And that's then when you start ordering plugs.
Oh man. No, don't worry. We'll just hydro test it.
It's all fine.
That fixes everything.
Yeah.
Man.
So during all this time, while whether you're a unit guy or you're a contract inspector, you're familiar with the unit. There's always going to be odd jobs that we get called upon to go and look at. And this could be some of the decom piping stuff, but it also could be something else. Sometimes it's even structural, right? Off the top of your head, do you guys have any experiences with some weird things that you went and looked at during turnaround?
It's odd jobs leading up to it. I know, we have my original facility is an old one with a fluid catalytic cracker in it. So if anyone's familiar with that unit, it's very tall, right? So a lot of structure. We just happened to be walking up the stairs, probably about the 4th level or so, and the lead that happened to be running it, who happened to be the unit inspector as well, looks over at one of the main supports and sees a bunch of corrosion. And they're like, oh, well, that's interesting. Start digging, and it's like hole right through the web of the girder. And it's like, we need someone out here stat, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
nice.
And that's something that you should get while you're doing your on stream, but for whatever reason, it's, it wasn't captured by anyone who was looking at it. So,
yeah, on the topic of the kind of the structural, even on this turnaround we're planning now, or I guess getting into, whatever you want to call it, just around some of the new pumps that are getting upgraded. A lot of the base supports were inadequate, so there was a whole bunch of structural extensions going on that, I mean, and you don't really think much of that, but it's a lot of work and hours that somebody didn't account for. And then even one of them, there wasn't enough room under the piping to get their machining tool on there to machine the base support flat once they put the extension on. So we ended up having to cut some piping off, get this machining done, weld it back on, hydro test the flange, that type of thing. So not that there's anything odd about that specific job, but that just wasn't part of the plan, and it just kind of came up, got actioned.
Yeah, that's all I kind of meant by odd jobs is just little things that get picked up.
Exactly.
And even at this stage, you might have your trades crews. Actually, one thing to jump back onto is while you're familiarizing yourself with the unit, you want to go get to know your trades guys. I think actually, Scott, you might have touched on that quick.
Yeah, maybe we did briefly.
Like super quick, but
yeah, this is definitely an opportunity you want to take with that. And I tell that to, I mean, I have a lot of friends on the QC side, the inspection side, that type of thing, even tradespeople too, right? And they'll, more so with the QC and the inspection people, but they'll, especially when they're kind of newer to turnaround, they'll ask like, you know, what's some advice? I have a lot of experience, but not in turnarounds. And the first thing I say to them always is get to know your GFs, get to know your foreman, and know what they're doing. Get a copy of their progress every day. Just know what's happening, right? You don't want the first time to meet them. It's kind of like getting to know your scope, right? You don't want to be the first time you meet that GF is when he calls you out because he's got some welding done or his inspection's ready or they blew through something that you should have been involved in, right? Then whose fault is that, right? If you didn't get to know him, they're kind of both to blame a little bit there, but you want to get to know the troublemakers. You want to get to know the guys that are going to help you, right? A lot of repeat offenders here, both good and bad. So yeah, you want to get to know everybody. The planners, the coordinators, your execution leads, those type of things. But yeah, especially those tradespeople, they're the ones doing the work. You really want to be in contact with them. Yeah,
and that's with anything. I mean, having a good rapport with your coworkers helps you so much. You're only one little bit of this, one little bit of the eye here, right? And so the more you know these people, the better they're going to give you information. And that's really what this is about, is information is power. And the more you know what's happening, the better you are. And the more they can trust you is the more they'll tell you, right? So
yeah, and you'll more often than not run into them because they're out doing the same thing you are, is familiarizing yourself with the unit. And usually foremans or someone on the crew is going to have a hard hat to distinguish their quote unquote rank within the workforce there. So you'll see them be like, hey, I'm so and so, who are you? And then, or maybe not who are you, but obviously a more friendly greeting. But like,
what are you doing on my turf?
Who
are you?
Introduce yourself to them, and
who's your daddy and what does he do?
and get to know them. Hey, I'm the scaffold foreman. The pipe fitters are going to be doing a job in the pipe rack here, and I'm just scoping that. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now, hey, maybe you need scaffold modified in a vessel, right? You can call the scaffolding foreman to send in a couple guys to come modify the scaffold for you to maybe get to that inlet deflector or anything like that, or maybe even a nozzle where in your current inspecting position, you don't quite have access to it, and you might have justification to get up there and inspect it, right?
And the rope guys are busy, of course. So
always. Everyone does things with ropes now.
The rope who? What?
Yeah.
Never
they call
mind.
them rats.
Yeah.
Rope access technicians.
Yeah. So, you know what? They provide a lot of value, and they do a lot of good work. And sometimes I do get not jealous that they're on the ropes, but like I want that scaffold built so I can crawl through a reactor. I don't care if they dangle and do just as good of a job, I guess, right?
Well, I don't know. I'll give my opinion on that. I've done a couple rope jobs, not too many. That's not really for me. I'd rather climb up a rock wall or something. I don't know it, but in my opinion of that is I don't do the same inspection on a rope as I do on a scaffold. That's just how it is, and then maybe that's not for everybody. Those individuals that like being on a rope all the time and climbing stuff, they probably do a better inspection on a rope than they would on a scaffold. That may be the case. So it's a different perspective there. If you got a like relatively new rope guy, you might not be getting kind of the inspection you want. And just jumping back quickly to like getting to know everyone, if you're, especially for those mechanical contractor or mechanical tradespeople, I guess, if they're doing their job and walking everything down, they're likely going to be coming to you with questions and stuff at this point anyways. So there should be a lot of meet and greet going on, unless nobody's doing that and everyone's just sitting back, read magazines or whatever, then good luck in your execution. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Don't do that when you got like your lead coming by. Don't just be sitting there reading.
Well, and unless
it's P&IDs and reports.
Sure, yeah, just be specific with your reading. But that's the downtime you're going to have, because once you get into the turnaround, maybe not right away, but once everything gets rolling and the repair work starts happening and inspections and everything else, you don't have that time to review your scope. That's came and gone. So use that wisely, especially if you have it.
You don't have much time for anything at that point. You like rush back to the trailer or wherever you're sitting, and you devour your food like a bird, right? It's just like just jamming it in there so you can get back out to the field and freaking
there's
catch
always
up.
assholes like me trying to like, hey, where's that report? I need that report. And you're like, well, if you wouldn't have had me in 6 different equipment, I would have had the report done for you.
I used to joke around with a guy I work with quite a bit that all you really need to do is strategically place a couple salted crackers throughout the unit and a few cans of Coke, and then you don't even have to stop. You just run around, grab one, onto the next piece of equipment.
Piss jugs in the equipment.
Yeah, you'd see the laborers in the field. They just catching cracker scores there, right?
Yeah,
walking up on them. Maybe just a touch. Rope access guys, we love you. Don't worry about it. So,
no shade for sure.
No,
definitely not.
Quite honestly, it's such a new thing now that it's hard to have. Really, we're asking them to be jacks of all trades, and you can't be effective at anything if you're doing that. So, give it time, and I guarantee you're going to see absolutely a lot. There's a lot of smart people in there. I've got some really close friends that work at rope access techs, and I think give it enough time, and you're going to see it probably change. And that opinion of, hey, a rope access inspection is going to be less isn't necessarily going to be the story at all times. But I mean, if you build scaffolding, you can put lights in there, you can stand, you can just right up against the wall. And I mean, I think with ropes, it's a little bit more difficult, but I think you'll see it swing once it gets more explored.
The one piece of equipment actually that it does drive me crazy is heaters, right? Like the arch and the roof of the heater and the upper portion of the tubes are, it's all critical, and you might be limited with ropes unless, you have some elaborate system to kind of actually pull you in and around, right?
And they do. That's usually they have some sort of aspect to do that. You can loop a rope around one of the top supports and you can move in with it. But especially if it's a vertical cylindrical, so one of those ones that hang the tubes around the outside, or rather as an X is, can happen in a hard floor. It's better to do it with a scaffold there, just because you can get to everything. But if you've got some sort of ducting that's completely encompassed by what do you call it, refractory like blanket, anything you put on there will wreck that, and you'll now have a hot spot and have to fix that. Yeah. So in that respect, it's much better to have rope access, where you can just sort of Mission Impossible float across a furnace and inspect things.
No, for sure. There's a time and place for both, right? So that was just the one personal pet peeve. Like I think in actually reactors and stuff like that, like it is pretty good, right? Like
and it's some of the, I guess you want to call it technologies, equipment, so whatever they use to get places, it's quite interesting. Like one of the minimal experience I have with rope access jobs is in a sphere, and I'm just thinking like, what do you just? I'm just going to dangle in the middle of this thing, and like somebody's going to push me and circle around to try to get at the shell. But no, they got like a spreader bar type of contraption that gets you all over the place, and it actually does a good job. But again, that's like, if you're one of those rope people, you probably do the better inspection on the rope than you would on a scaffold, because that's what you're used to, I guess. It kind of goes both ways.
Just lower the motorcycle in there and just start doing the death ball.
Just keep spinning around until you've covered it all.
When he first started talking about ropes, I thought he was going to start talking about his trip to Japan there, so I didn't know. So, getting to know anyone. What else can we talk about during this time frame? Maybe there's possible equipment delays from prefab, right?
I think there almost always is, and that goes for piping too. But for equipment, it seems like, and it's not all your equipment. Say you're getting like 10 vessels or whatever fabricated. There's going to be like one of them that something goes a little sideways with it. Either the fabrication's taking longer than expected, they failed some A&D, they failed a hydro test, something like that. Like just a quick example for one that, for this turnaround that we're actually executing now, or this could be a made up story, whatever you want to go with here. But there's a bundle replacement scope, a couple of them, and two of them keep failing hydro tests. So now there's contingency plans in place, money in place for this to, the bundle is a metallurgy upgrade, I guess I should say that, or that's originally what the plan is supposed to be. But now there's contingencies in place to replace one in kind as the carbon steel, so just having that built now to swap it out is versus the upgrade, and then the other one will be a retube. And the reason it's that is just time constraints, right? There's not time to build two new carbon steel ones. Oddly enough, the retube is actually significantly quicker than the replacement in kind. So there's already contingencies in place for that. So now you're going from like a significant metallurgy upgrade and some new components to swapping out something that you had replaced in kind that now is going to only make it to the next turnaround run again, where hopefully your fabricator gets their shit together and gets these things to you and certified, and then they're ready to go, in 5 years or whatever the case is.
Right. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And this is one of the reasons a lot of turnaround philosophies have thou shalt have all your major equipment on place a couple of months early, whether it's 2-3 months. And that's because if you come into that 2-3 month window, you're now throwing the 8 ball, whether you're even going to get it, right?
Yeah.
And so in that case, that 2 to 3 months is enough to say we're going to put in plans to fix the old one and make sure we can do it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of a drop dead land on site type of date. Yeah, and most places do that, and we're kind of no different. I guess it maybe went a little closer than it should have because it's just really unsuspecting, but that is something that's typically in place. And even for some of the project scope, a lot of that stuff was delayed too. It got here on time, but yeah, you start getting nervous about that. Like, are we talking like 4 or 5 bundles we don't have now?
Yeah, it's a tough thing especially with bundle upgrade, because usually that is driven by you cannot operate with what's in place for a full turnaround.
Right.
Use it, or you're at least heavily stressed to do it, right?
Right.
So in that case, you kind of say, yeah, we have to do this in order to make the next run. So there's multiple ways to look at it, but you're right. That would be one where you can't go back and really fix it. Like you can, but now you're talking about, okay, well, we need another turnaround to go put the new one in, right?
Yeah, and then even with the retube and things, you got to remember these shops. If you're in a center that has fabrication facilities there, that's even better. But you got to remember they are not your side shop that just does work for you whenever you please. They have other clients and customers and things going on too. They may not have time, and in a lot of cases you call them for an emergency retube and they say, no, we don't have the room in the shop, we can't help you out.
Yep.
And then what do? You're plugging tubes, and hopefully you can get a little more life out of this thing.
And that's one of the aspects that actually weighs into choosing when to do a turnaround is when everyone else around you is doing it also. Because if you're all doing one at one time, all of a sudden, IOLs, Imperial Oil's throwing money at one person, and then this person's throwing money at the other one, and they're like, well, money talks, and that's the way it is, right? So it's a competition, really, is what it is. And so if you can balance that out, you end up without those problems, or at least with less.
Yeah, and not to mention me and Frank need to stagger our workload throughout the year too.
Can't get in on all the turnarounds if they're all at once.
That's right.
Just working at each one for 3 weeks just to show face, right?
There you go.
Exactly, yeah. A couple days a week and just rotate in and out. Day shift here, night shift there.
No, that is a good point about, most turnarounds do happen within specific time frames of the year. Especially here, right? The previous facility Ryan worked at, their turnarounds would be in February because the climate allowed for it.
Absolutely.
Right? And it was gorgeous.
And it was very specific because we could pull in all the best Boilermakers you can get. We have no conflicts with anyone, and it was absolutely strategic, either directly basically in winter, or it was in entering into after fall, like spring and fall sides. So
coming out of winter and going into winter.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. I was chopping my words up.
I didn't even catch that. Thanks.
I helped you out there.
Thank you very much.
We're here to support each other.
Kind of blacked out there for a moment.
So it is really good, and that comes with schedule and planning, right? Your maybe contracts and procurement portion of that company needs to get on and notify your service providers, your RV repair shop, your fabrication and repair companies. Hey, we're having a turnaround during this time. There may be some people that they want to name hire. They want to make sure that they have the materials so you don't run into that problem, like that hypothetical bundle you're dealing with.
Yeah, and that is a good point. And they will have those relationships well in advance, or they should, or you're going to be into trouble. And you mentioned RVs quickly. That's another good one too. You don't want to, somebody asked me about kind of the shelf life of when an RV is tested. So you don't want to get these things, especially if you have a swap out type of thing, where like sometimes you'll pull the RV, get it tested, put it back in. Or more often than not, maybe. But a lot of instances, you'll have like a swap out or a spare or a number of spares. You don't want to get those all pre-tested like a year before the turnaround and then put them in, because now you've just knocked off a a year of your inspection date. You're going to be doing it that much sooner. So those are things to look at too. You don't want to, you can get into trouble by doing it too early per se as well.
Yeah, you might throw off that PSV's interval, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of sites they have 2 months. If it hasn't been inspected or reserviced inside of 2 months, it's not considered serviced, and then it has to go for another one.
Yeah.
So then you're looking at doing it twice. So you just paid for something twice for really no good reason.
Exactly.
Probably more expensive the second time too.
The pop's so nice they paid for it twice, right?
Oh, that was a good closeout. You should have saved it.
The one that I get the most about that is making sure you have the right NDE companies on place, because oftentimes we're looking at, if you do anything with HTHA inspections, so high temperature hydrogen attack, you need the Cadillac to do that inspection. There's so many different things you do at it that you need to have absolutely name. You need to be talking to the guy. He needs to be known. He needs to be gone for specialized testing, and it's very specific. So it's very key to not have that guy on another job when you need him.
Yeah, not only that, and their numbers too, right? Like even just the surface NDE guys that you need, say you need 50 of them.
Absolutely.
Don't give them 10 if you need 50. Give them 50. I mean, there's only so much they can do too, right? So that's something you really got to account for. That can be a tough battle sometimes. Sometimes not so much. That's very facility dependent, person dependent, maybe negotiating skills, that type of thing. But
this is a turnaround. You don't want to have all the people you need. You want to watch them struggle a little bit.
Well, that's typically the idea, but I'd like to see it go the other way for once. See what that's like.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Something else actually that you might want to do. It depends, but it depends on the site. If you have a man watch that you like, right? You meet a man watch, you might want to have the same man watch with you and kind of shadow you for all your jobs. I remember back in the day, like I'm not that freaking old, but I remember back in the day, we used to get 4 or 5 permits at once for separate vessels, right?
Yeah.
And you would just pluck a man watch from the trailer and say, okay, this is what we're going. Do you know that the button on the side of the mic of your radio contacts emergency, and they'll either nod or right, and you take them and you just plow out those vessels. And most of the time, like personally, I would be writing my notes, essentially my inspection report at each vessel. So it might be 5, 6 hours, 7 hours, and I don't know. That's just something I like.
Absolutely.
You remember that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. I mean, nowadays it's a little hard to keep your own personal man watch. That's not really typically an option anymore. But what I like to do is when I get to the manway or whatever I'm doing that involves a man watch or somebody that's going to be looking out for me, I have a bit of a conversation with them. I make sure they understand what their job is. If they're sitting there like they don't even have a pulse, I'm going to ask for somebody else, because most of the time nothing's going to happen to you when you're in there. But when you're in there, if you have a good man watch, they should be yelling at you every once in a while. They should be engaged in their job. I mean, it can be a boring job, but at the end of the day, they're kind of your lifeline, right? They are your lifeline. If something happens in there, even if you just fall down and knock yourself out or something like that, if that guy isn't there to call someone for you, nobody is. So yeah, you want to have that good talk with them, and yeah, if they don't seem competent, get another one. There's lots of them there.
That's usually the tactic. They'll at least operations will assign like a whole watch controller. Yeah, and they'll say, inspectors, you guys are going to do a lot of it, and they usually will assign one person for it. But
yeah, they'll have a foreman or something.
Yeah, and you will have one person watching a hole often, unless it's like this is one with a whole bunch of capital work going on, and you've got a guy stationed there at all times. Then maybe not, but I mean, yeah.
We might have to add the man watch supervisor to one of the key people to get in touch with as you're doing your walkarounds, maybe along with your trades.
We just skipped over them. Yeah,
that's a good point.
And that's the whole name of the podcast too, right? Yeah. It's pretty funny. But that is something that you want to go talk to them. And I remember at the previous facility Ryan worked at, you would have to go through a single person, or you blindly call on a radio to the ether and say, I need a man watch at this vessel number. And, you'll meet them there, or, maybe the odd time they get lost and they're kind of wandering around and you're stuck. But, that's the kind of the importance of finding somebody that you're comfortable working with and kind of knows knows what
Exactly.
you're doing, and even you can hold a conversation with, right? Now, also during those times we didn't wear respirators in the vessels, right? And you would just
That's
be
true.
sitting there talking to
Yeah.
buddy, right?
Yeah, that's odd thinking
Yeah.
about that now too.
Right,
Jeez,
yeah.
some of the stuff we used
Well,
to do.
especially now you're wearing a mask going everywhere, and
Yeah, sitting at your desk, you're wearing a mask now.
I remember they didn't even require it for like furnaces, fired kale wool and stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
Stuff. It's stunning now, but
yeah, your mouth's just all like chalky from coming out of
oh,
it,
I
right?
got a bad cough.
Yeah.
Might be asbestosis.
I don't know. You think it's worth talking about maybe some of like the COVID procedures and stuff like that, or should we just say, you know what?
I don't know. I
Don't
think-
get into that mess.
I think we could do a whole hour on that because there's a lot of insight there. Like there's been a lot of turnaround deferrals, which is a huge deal in itself. There's a lot of practices, procedures people are implementing on their sites, even at the shops, the fabrication facilities. So I think there's a lot to talk about there. I don't know if I really want to even get into that because that could be a whole thing that a big audience is interested into or not at all. Like I don't know. I think there is a lot there though, and it's kind of interesting how our regulator has taken the approach to the turnaround deferrals as opposed to how they typically would do it under these new COVID kind of new normal type of thing. So I don't know. That's all I want to say about that. I think I could go off for a little bit about that one, but
It's very much procedurally oriented. I think being on the ground is just mostly like make sure you clean yourself and make sure your equipment's been quarantined for enough hours that it's not at risk. But realistically, I wear a half mask or a full face all the time when I'm going into vessels and stuff.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not that big of a deal, right?
Yeah, it's just the internal inspection thing, I guess, isn't really any different. It's kind of everything else.
Even outside, right? But there's other aspects from it, but you're right. This is a very deep subject. I think we should just avoid it right now.
It is, but I think the best way to like summarize it is that the policies are made and we have to adhere to them regardless of what they are. So, you know what, if you want to work, would follow the frickin' rules and try not, wash your hands and try not to catch corona.
Well, and the one thing, like this is my personal opinion, of course, is not based in fact, but and this kind of alludes to sort of what I've done is just have an option and pursue it. Make a choice and everyone get behind it because that's really where your strength is. Mm-hmm. If everyone's arguing over what to do, you're not going to be effective anywhere. Right. So pick one and go with it. Maybe it's not the one you prefer, but at least it's something, right?
Well, you know what? I don't know too much about exactly how they're going to organize the trades. I think initially things will be a little bit slower, but I think an odd side effect might be some jobs might get done a lot quicker because it's going to be a limited amount of people or crews within a specific area, and they're just going to have the ability to work with no interference from other trades, right? Because there's consistently overlapping work and people stepping on each other, causing delays, right?
That's a very good point. And normally, if you do a turnaround plan properly, it's called deconflicting, but it's basically to make sure that someone's not working over another person. This just escalates it more, so it makes it forces them to be more conscious of that. And basically, if you look a lot of incidents, it's often cross trades where it's someone's undoing a flange, putting liquid into the water, and someone's grinding right next to it, and it lights off the oil. That's kind of where you get your incidents, is with cross trades, SIMOPS communications stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. And like I can think of an example of something like that on a turnaround I was on, just wandering around, walking down actually the Boilermakers were pulling a bundle, which is part of the story. So I was probably watching them is why I was in the area, but the pipe fitters were underneath them, couple, probably let's say 2 levels down on the permanent structure, bolting up a valve or pipe fitting or whatever they do. And the Boilermakers are pulling a bundle above them. Now, there's no concern to drop the bundle on them. There's all sorts of structure and grading and everything in there, so there's no real concern there. But once they broke the seal of the bundle, it just started pouring, like, I want to say cooling water or something, nothing really concerning. But when you're the pipe fitter down there and you're getting drenched in some sort of liquid and you're in the refinery, you
don't know what that is.
Exactly, and there's a good chance it's something that you don't want on you, right? You don't know it's just water. So
absolutely.
They were quite terrified and a little upset with them, but to the Boilermakers' credit, they weren't expecting that either, or at least, you know, maybe ops didn't expect that either, or, you know, maybe somebody didn't tell somebody that that was the case. But either way, that's an example of working on top of each other.
And that's a thing that's really coming along. They call it simultaneous operations, SIMOPS for short. But it's something that they've identified. Multiple facilities and companies have identified this as an area of improvement that can really help. And most, like I said, most incidents do happen from that sort of lack of communication, and something falls out and someone drops a shackle from a 3D head for cleaning down onto someone below, and you have a major injury, you know. So it's important. Yeah.
No, it definitely is. And that's actually something to even be aware of while you're doing your walkarounds, right? And I think everybody knows what a pain in the butt flagging and red and yellow ribbon is during turnarounds, and like
3-sided barriers.
Yeah. The 3-sided red. That's the best.
Yeah. So, you know, be aware of where you are. Be aware, like if you're climbing up on a structure and getting off at a specific level, take a quick peek up what's above you, right? And it might save you from drinking some cooling water from.
Oh, no doubt. I found myself in a 3-sided red just the other day. I was doing back to the decon systems, doing a walk down with operations and a couple other people, and there was a couple temp exchangers. So I decided to go around this way, and the process guy decided to go around the other way, and we met up on the other side. And there was red ribbon in between us. And he goes, so you're on the wrong side of the ribbon. I said, I don't know. I think you're on the wrong side of the ribbon. And I looked up, and there's a crane boom over me. Nothing on it. And they were done their lift, but they knocked down like the one side of the ribbon where they were working, but left the other 3 sides up where you just walked right into it, like kind of corralled in there. Yeah. So yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just know also just what the site specific safety rules are. You know, I don't want to say it doesn't vary too much, but each site has specific confined space requirements. You know, some of them it's your face, some of them you can stick your arm in with a camera and just start snapping photos, right? So just know what you're getting into, and even vessel skirts and stuff like that.
Locks.
And
locks are a big
they may have a lockbox requirement for entry.
Some sites only required if you've got like rotational energy or something like that. Other sites require on everything, you know, a lock around a flange, even though it's got a blind in it, you need an actual person to undo it. So it's, you know, there's different levels. Yeah,
and that's a whole nother procedure. Well, we tried to keep this episode short. We're at an hour, which still isn't bad.
It's not too bad.
Should we continue on, or is there anything else? Like, I think we could even keep pursuing this, maybe in a supplementary episode to this, maybe about inspection techniques and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we haven't even got into our turnaround yet, so I would say this is a multi-series type of thing. We'll just kind of keep on going with maybe the side detailed, like we did with the piping, for example. But yeah, I think there's a lot more to this for sure. But how many hours do you want to listen to us for?
I'm already losing my own voice, so.
Oh yeah,
I can't even pay attention to myself anymore.
Okay, so I think that's it. Depending on what the next, like if we continue on with this, we might release 2 of these episodes back to back. So there's no cliffhangers or anything like that. I do hate that, but it also does drive anticipation, right?
Yeah, you're just gonna have to stay tuned and see what happens.
Yeah. So. Scott, do you want to try and tackle? Ryan gave me a good idea for a sign off today.
Did you? Well, let's hear it. You already gave us one good one about 3/4 of the way through.
I already forgot it, but it was good. Actually, I want to say one last thing, and I was pretty quiet when it happened. But you made a comment there about the claw plucking you out of the cage.
Yeah,
I was freaking dying. Like I had to mute it. I had to mute the mic because
You've been to that job too, have you?
Yeah.
Well, oh my God. Like I spit out a little bit of my drink, and like I was just, that was a pretty funny comment, but no, I don't even remember that. So
well, how about that for sign off? Watch out for the claw.
Yeah, perfect. I like it. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Hopefully I'll come back.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a pretty good conversation. It was a lot of fun. Hey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to talk things through.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for listening. Don't watch out for the claw and don't forget to knock your lock off. See you guys
Yeah, there
later.
you go.
Yeah.